All right, today we're going to talk about eradicating evil. Egypt is evil. Chametz is evil. How deep does it go? How broad is the penetration? And what's required in order for us to be able to get rid of the bad stuff? So in the Haggadah, after we talk about the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, at a certain point we start recounting the details of all the plagues. And then we talk about the details, then we go through a code of the Tzach Hadash Ba'achav. And then we talk about this idea that the plagues were more than we think they were, more than meets the eye. It's not so simple. It's not just like the simple 10 plagues. And there's a yad, and there's an etzba, Mitzrayim is a finger, Kriyas Yamsuf is a hand. And in this whole discussion, we come across a machlekes, a dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Eliezer says that kol makkah hoyseh shel arba makkos, that every plague was comprised of 4, and Rabbi Akiva says that kol makkah is chamesh makkos, it's 5 makkos. So it's mavur b'sfarim, primarily the kolboy, the Pirush Haggadah of the kolboy. It's also brought down the Ritva and other Rishonim. The following explanation: Hamakos noyadu lahakos ulevatel as tumas Mitzrayim. The intent of the makkah, the purpose of the makkah, was to strike and to nullify the impurity that Egypt was. And of course, this was a teaching thing as well, as we learned that at least the 9 makkahs were not raw punishment, but there was also some kind of effective redirection of Mitzrayim. But Egypt is evil. So the makkah, if you're going to come and try to teach or sublimate or redirect evil, you're going to have to really strike hard at it. It doesn't respond to tender loving care. So in order for Egypt to be changed, something major had to unfold. And that was the makkahs. And the question becomes, Ad kama hatuma chodra la'oimek ha'inyanim shel Mitzrayim. How deep did Egypt's evil go? Ubemakvil, and in perfect corollary, la'eze oimek chodra ha'makkos. Depending on how deep was the penetration of evil, that's how deep or how profound the makkah would have to be. So l'chol hadeis, according to all opinions, ha'makkah leipagu rak b'chitzenius. The makkah, the plague, was not just something that was superficial, only for appearance's sake. Uberovid hagilui shel advarim, on the external, virtual or superficial reality of things. But rather, elachadru la'oimkam ulumahusam hapnimi. What happened was that when the makkah struck Egypt, so we're dealing with how deep evil had, if you will, permeated the Egyptian reality. And because the Egyptian reality had become deep and pernicious, so the makkah had to strike also in a deep and profound way. The question is, how deep was the evil? So how deep was the makkah? And this is the machlekes, says the kolbay, of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is that the makkah chadru la'arba hayesedus, that the makkah drilled down into what's called the 4 elements. So this sounds ancient and almost silly to people, but it really isn't. That the Greeks used to say that everything is comprised of fire, wind, water, and soil. Eish, ruach, mayim, afar. The only thing is, it's not a Greek idea, it's a Torah idea. And if it's a Torah idea, it's a true idea. And the question is just language. Because does it mean Eish mean what we think it means? Does it really mean fire? Does it really mean wind? So here's a different way to read it. There's energy, there's gas, there's liquid, and there's solid. And that is the basic building blocks of reality. That's once you get past quantum physics, once you start dealing with reality as we can see it, as we know it, everything is comprised of energy and gas, solid and liquid. That's what they talk about. Scientists talk about the pre-biotic reality, or they call this like a soup of molecular structure that exploded or whatever it was, and how things began. They talk about these basic, they identify these basic elements. So Torah teaches us that everything has these elements included in it. Everything has fumes. Everything has a certain amount of gas. Everything has an energy. There's electrons that hold everything together. Everything has a certain amount of liquid, and primarily most things are solid. That's what happens when you see there's a fire. So the fire is the release of the electrons. So when the electrons are released, so then the subatomic structure collapses. When that collapses, the gas is released into the air. The smoke or fumes. You always see a little bit of liquidity. If you put a match on this table, you'll see some liquid immediately appear. And eventually, what are you left with? Ashes. There's your offer. Efer. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, the evil of Mitzrayim had permeated all four building blocks of reality. And so Itamaka had to be a makkah on all levels. Had to be a level on the level of electrons, on the level of gas, on the level of solid, on the level of liquid. Ve'ilu, however, L'das Rabbi Akiva, Hamaka is Chadru, the plague penetrated and permeated. But Neisif La'arba, you say this, in addition to the four elements, which everything is comprised of, Gam L'chaymer Ha'hiyuli. Also, too, what's called the Greeks called it the ethereal reality, or the ethereal component, which this is the origin of the English word quintessence. The word quint in Latin or Greek is 5. So they said there's 4 elements. Everything is comprised of 4 elements, and then there's a 5th element that holds it all together. And this is what the Greeks called. They call this the stuff that gods are made of, called the ethereal reality. We talk about things which are like magical, where unicorns prance around. Call it the ethereal reality, but that's of course narishkeit. There is, of course, however, there's a basic superstructure that holds everything together. This really is quantum physics, and the word quantum is also connected, I think, to 5. So the idea of the quantum physics of it is not just in the external reality of the energy and of the gas, solid and liquid, but according to Rabbi Akiva, the evil had penetrated the quantum physics reality as well. So therefore, there's what's called in Hebrew an etzam hachaymer shemufshat mehatzuras hamugderesh la yisaydis. There's what I guess the Hagg's Bigson called the God particle, or is that what keeps everything together, or the stratosphere, or whatever English terminology you want to use. But this 5th level is something that keeps all of the different elements in unison, that creates the structure of it. And Rabbi Akiva says that the makkah, in order for it to be corrective for Mitzrayim, couldn't simply affect only the 4 levels, but it had to also affect the 5th level as well. Hence, you have now a rational, logical way of understanding the machlekes, a dispute that seems to make no sense. Rabbi Eliezer says 4, Rabbi Akiva says 5. It actually makes perfect sense. Okay, so this is basically the idea of the, like I said, the Kol B'Ei Ritva and others. Now, the Rebbe points out that Gam B'Isur Chametz, when we speak about the prohibition of Chametz, Shabo K'Teitzah Mitumas Mitzrayim, Chametz represents the essence of Egypt. Chametz is the idea of the arrogance, blown up of self-importance. The Pharaoh said, "Who is Hashem? I shall listen to him." Never heard of him. Li Ervani Asasini. I made the river. I made the country. I am God. I don't no such thing. I don't humble myself for anybody. So this is unbridled arrogance that represents Pharaoh and by extension Egypt. And Chametz represents that idea. So we find a similar machlekes. This machlekes is not between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, but we find an opinion that Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ein bir chametz ela sreifa." The only way that chametz can be properly destroyed is if we incinerate it. The Chachamim meimrim, the sages say that's not necessary. Af mefarer v'zoyre leruach. We could also put it into small crumbs and kind of just throw it to the wind, or mataliyam, or throw it into the sea. And once it throws into the deep sea or in a deep river, so then it would come apart and it's not identifiable anymore. So the Rogatchover Gaon, who's arguably the greatest mind of the 20th century, in his commentary on the Torah called Sofnas Paneach, he writes, Shaladas Rabbi Yehuda, that according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, Isser Chametz, the prohibition of Chametz, Choyder be'etzem mitzayusay shel Chametz. It goes so deep. The Chametz, the prohibition of Chametz, is not just on the external form of Chametz. The prohibition of Chametz goes not beyond the form. It goes into matter itself. And as long as the matter of Chametz is still around, even if the form is no longer visible, because you turned it into crumbs, You made it into particles. You spread the particles. So now there's no substance. You cannot actually identify a form of chametz. There is no chametz which you can point a finger at. But nonetheless, the chametz in theory is still here. The chametz is not gone. You just can't see it. So all you've attacked, if you're mefara v'zeir l'ruach, all you've attacked is the superficial reality of it. You've attacked the for appearance's sake, but you haven't done anything to the core essence. The essence of the chametz hasn't been destroyed at all. So Rabbi Yehuda says that's not good enough. You have to destroy the chametz entirely. And he says because it's the chametz itself, the evil of chametz goes down to the essence of chametz itself. Lachein hashbasas ubir chametz. Therefore, the destruction of the chametz. You have to attack the subatomic structure. You have to literally pull apart the actual quantum physics of the things. And when you do that, then chametz is destroyed. If you didn't do that, the chametz is still there. According to the majority opinion of the sages, it's not, the prohibition is not that there shouldn't be a quantum physics reality of chametz. There shouldn't be a superficial reality. You shouldn't be able to see chametz. You should be able to identify chametz. As long as you're not able to actually visualize the chametz, as long as you can't actually see it, so that means the superficial structure is gone, the superficial reality is no longer available. So even if the essential reality of chametz is still there, that doesn't bother us. That's something that we're not concerned with. And therefore, one doesn't have to burn the chametz. Incidentally, one does not have to burn the chametz. We make a point of burning chametz because we want to actually go ahead and fulfill the mitzvah of destroying chametz. But like when Erev Pesach comes out on Shabbos, we just flush the crumbs down the toilet. We get rid of the chametz. We don't necessarily have to burn it. Interestingly, there's an opinion of the Minchas Chinuch who says that a person should save a kezayis of chametz for when the clock strikes midday, when you're actually prohibited, and then at that moment you should go ahead and burn it. So you should fulfill not by burning the chametz by when Erev Pesach comes, then once Shasa Isser, once the prohibited time arrives, you no longer have chametz because it's already been destroyed. He says you should bekum v'asei, you should actually be commanded to go ahead and destroy the chametz. Nobody follows the Minchas Chinuch, by the way. Nobody does this, but because practically speaking, it's hard to live walk a tightrope, and everybody's afraid of being at that moment, and maybe won't destroy it fast enough. We don't actually do it. But the principle, the theory, is a very compelling one. So the Chachamim say it's not the essence of the chametz; it's only the Torah. It's only the superficial form. Umishum kach, because of this, dai, it's sufficient. Lefarer es hachametz ulezreisai ulhatil liyam. You can crumb the chametz. You just throw it to the winds, throw it to the sea. That's good enough. Kigam bezerach zu. Also, if you did this. Can you eat crumbs that have been spread over a vast area? You can't even find them. So there's no issue. The point is, it shouldn't be chametz which is identifiable, chametz which can actually be seen, chametz should actually be felt, chametz which is actually a possibility of eating it. The Torah says you get rid of it entirely, you can't own it, it cannot exist in your reality. But I said, but really it still exists. It's just, in theory, I can't practically pull it together, but in theory it still exists. So he says, in that case, you still have chametz. So as long as the chametz is still available, you still have it. Interestingly, there's a dispute whether or not I have to be concerned if there are chametz ingredients that are found within a composite. So today we have various products that are made of a very complex composite. And the question is, do I have to be worried about that for Pesach? So there's some opinions that say yes. If there's alcohol in the shampoo or whatever else it is, it's a concern. Why is it a concern? How are you going to get the alcohol out? How are you going to find an edible? So this is like an extreme opinion, but it says today in a laboratory, it's very easy to identify things. If you know what you're doing, you sit there with a Bunsen burner and a little bit of an apparatus, you could actually locate, you can isolate whatever particular thing it is that might be chametz, and in that case, it's doable. You can reverse the process. So if the process is reversible, I have an issue. Then I still have the chametz. The chametz is not here in a manner that I can actually identify, but it's easily identifiable. I can actually put it back together. As I said, this would be like a stringency of the week kind of a thing. And there are many opinions that say that it's not required to go to such extremes, but that's the theory behind it. And in that theory, even maybe the Chachamim would agree that's a problem, because mefazer v'zeh l'ruach can go collecting particles of chametz from all over is not possible. But this is easily done. Just have to have a little lab set up in your basement. You can do it. Anyway, so that's the machlokes, says the Rogatchover Gaon. That's the difference between the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. How deep does the prohibition of chametz go? So the Rebbe suggests, the Rebbe sees two different ideas. The way the Rishonim explain the argument between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva regarding the Makos, whether the Makos were 4 or comprised of 5. And the Rebbe draws a corollary, a line between the Rogatchover's explanation of the dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. How far does one need to go in order to destroy Chametz? The Rebbe says, Hadvarim tu'umim l'machlekes shel Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Akiva. Same thing. It matches perfectly. Ladas Rabbi Eliezer, according to Rabbi Eliezer, Hamakis chadru ledvarim kifi shehem kvar kiblu tzura murkeves me'arba yasedus. When is there an issue? When is Mitzrayim evil? Only when it assumes a form. And the form is a complex composite. It's bringing together of the 4 different elements. And that's when you have Egypt, that's when you have evil. And as long as the evil can, so to speak, be, the makkah can strike down into the 4 elements, you're safe. Kishitas chachamim, sheyes levaris hachame is tzuras v'teira chametz. Like just like this is in parallel with the shita, the opinion of the sages, who say that in order to get rid of chametz, I have to just deal with the superficial structure. I have to deal with the actual form of the chametz in our tangible world. Ladas Rabbi Akiva, the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who says that the makah soyugam b'chayim hayuli, that the plague struck at Egypt so profoundly, so deeply, that it wasn't just the form of the physicality that it struck, but it actually went into the Chayim Rayuli, it went down into the subatomic reality, it rearranged everything, the makkah permeated entirely the strata of existence, etzam hadavar. So this fits perfectly with the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Shabir v'ashbasas hachametz, that the destruction of chametz could only be done in one way, and that's b'sreifa, only with burning, because only burning destroys the subatomic structure. That's the nature of a fire. So once a fire happens, the subatomic structure is no longer, and that's called bitul etzam mitziyusi. Lefize, move on. According to this, we'll now understand something else. Yesh medrash chazal. There are various homilies from our sages. Shemoinin es shibud Mitzrayim ke'echad me'arba galios. There are some who consider Mitzrayim to be one of the 4 proverbial exiles. V'yesh she'eina meinin es Mitzrayim ben arba galios. Then we have the Gemara in Megillah that divides between the galus of Paras and Modai, and seems not to speak of that as one of the 4 exiles. So we have this Bereshis Rabbah that includes Egypt, and then we have the Gemara Megillah that doesn't. So the thing is like this. L'chol hadeis, everybody would agree. Golos Mitzrayim, he shoyrish kol ha'golios. The Egyptian exile is the source of all exiles. So what's the question then? The question then is, Hashayla hi, be'eze mida tumas Mitzrayim chadra be'eretz Mitzrayim. How deep the impurity, how deep did the godlessness of Mitzrayim penetrate into the reality of Mitzrayim? Im hi chadra gam b'chaymer hayuli. Did it approach, did it, if you will, did it tinker with the subatomic reality? So if it did, harehi inyan neisef, chomer yeser. If Mitzrayim was beyond what the eye could see, if Mitzrayim was a galus that was so deep and pernicious that it went down into the what we're going to call the subatomic reality, so then it can't be compared to the other Arba Golias, because the Arba Golias were on the surface, but not intrinsic. If the evil only goes so deep as to penetrate the 4 different dimensions, but it doesn't go beyond, so then in that case, it can be compared to the Arba Golias that follow. In other words, the question is, how evil is evil today? And it seems pretty clear that evil today isn't as bad as it used to be.
What? It was worse.
It was worse. It was worse. Here's the good news, in other words. Once we left Mitzrayim, that level of evil has already been removed. So the job is somewhat easier. And the possibility of being able to rarefy or redirect evil is a little more available. Because Mitzrayim, only in Mitzrayim could the evil have penetrated so deep that it actually tinkered with the subatomic reality. But the reality we have today is more of a superficial reality. So once you get past the surface, Once you drill down, so to speak, into the subatomic reality, you should be able to rejig things. You should be able to turn it around. So the good news is that we live in a very evil world, but an evil world that's waiting for us to rotate it. It's waiting for us to sublimate it. And very, very often, you find that the huge challenges, you think they're impossible, if you attack it with the full zest and gusto of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's makas, and you put yourself into it, that you see that you're not, it doesn't always happen, but very, very often, that we're able to actually turn things around and to experience goodness and light where evil and darkness once reigned. And Galus Mitzrayim is the source of all Galias. The Exodus is the source of all redemptions. So we just have to follow the matrix. And if we follow the matrix and we deal with the evil instead of ignoring it, like it says, Boyal Pare, Moshe Rabbeinu had to go to Pharaoh, not avoid him. You have to deal with it head on. So with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help, we'll be able to turn things around and make a better world for all of us, accelerating the process of global redemption, like Day Mashiach Tzedkeinu, B'mheira B'yameinu. Amen.